And here we're using lines of direction again, just smooth lines that flow to the island where the seagulls are. And then here we're moving the horizon line into the bottom thirds. This is just a nice, peaceful, easy feeling. And again, we're using the trees on the left third side of the photograph. And just to show you that you don't always have to keep the image exact format as it came out of the camera, feel free to do some cropping with it. And in this case here, we made this into a slim line. And then, of course, you can mount this onto a rectangular, square board. It doesn't matter. But usually, well, in this case here, we put it onto a rectangular board. And then we just, again, it's the same image as before, but cropped and then mounted onto a board. It just gives a sort of a nice feeling. And this we did quite a bit when we entered our print competition. We would crop and make the image as powerful as you can make it, then crop it and then mount it a certain way on the mount board to give the image impact so it's going to get its highest score possible. And then moving on, here we're using more curved lines of direction mixed in with the contrast of the amber trees against the lighter sky. And again, we have a nice peaceful scene here with using the S curve here and the shoreline, and then we're using again the thirds on the left side with the trees. Here's the same image, except we're now shooting this in dynamic tone, which you could see just has so much more contrast to it. And again, using some patterns on the water. And of course, we have the thirds on the right-hand side with the trees. And if we wanted to do something with this image, here's one way that you could crop this, and then you can mount this again onto a rectangular board, but we crop this more of a slimline effect. And don't forget to cover your tracks when you come across them. And here we're using, again, diagonal lines of direction mixed in with rule of thirds, and then we're using the branch sort of as a framing of the lake. So we have three principles going here, not to mention the horizon line or the tree line is at the bottom thirds as well. Left third, we have a old tree trunk. In this image here, I saw these boaters heading over to shore, and I saw the sun line here, and I only had a few seconds to get my camera up and ready, so I quickly set it to aperture priority. And as soon as they hit that sun area, that bright area of the lake, I photographed it. And this we're going to talk about a little bit later in another video, which I'm going to be doing shortly, which I'll explain at the end of this one. And we're going back to leading diagonal lines, using S-curves here. And again, I gave this one here a little bit of a texture in Photoshop. And as you can see now, it's starting to get darker here. So should we pack up our things and leave? No, because this is the time it gets really beautiful. And then when you have a sunset, it's always a beautiful time to photograph. You have those beautiful colors, and then you can utilize some of the rules of composition. Now, mentioning these rules of composition, these are rules, don't think that they're etched in stone, because you could bend the rules, you can break the rules. However, you have to, in my opinion, I think it's good to know the rules, because then you could take it one step further if you want to. But don't fight certain things that are set in stone, because many of the old masters use these rules, and you can see it in their beautiful master paintings. So know them, and then you can bend them and break them. And these are the kind of rules that we would use in print competition. However, I had several successful images that were centered as well in certain ways. So it brought your attention to them, and they were centered, which is sometimes okay as well. But it's always interesting, though, if you could take them off center. Now, talking about being centered, many times you would, of course, if you do work, those of you that are professional photographers, when you do work for a client, they might say, well, I like this image, but it's off center. So to so many people, they think that being centered is the proper way. So I'm just pointing that out. So to them, being centered is the proper way. To us, we're using some of the rules of composition where they're not centered. So let's get back to the images. And again, beautiful sunsets, different views. Sun starting to go down. And on this one here, I just gave this one a filter effect in Photoshop. And another black and white. And in this case here, I chose black and white with an orange tone. So all you see is the orange color of the photograph. And when you're taking these photographs and you come up with an image that you really like, maybe you're on vacation, has special meaning to you, so you might want to make a nice wall decor image. And that's where the art of framing comes in. And then, of course, utilizing your art of composition when you're taking the images. And then you can further enhance that by special cropping, matting and mounting and framing. So here we just mounted this onto a rectangular board, and I made this a little bit slimmer than what the original is, and that's just one way of looking at it. You can also get a nice effect if you turn an image into an oval. And this particular one I did in Photoshop, but you can also have your image mounted and then get a mat board with an oval cutout and put that over your image, which we used to do back in the days of competition when everything had to be done by hand before there was Photoshop. Things are really amazing today, all the things you can do using Photoshop or any other program similar to that. And just a few other images using the same principles we talked about. And in this case here, I just used an old tree to frame the image on the top left third side of the photograph. And the color is just spectacular here at this lake at this time. So we were there at the right time at the right place. Now, just to show you a few different images that were done at a different lake, so we can point out some other elements of composition. But these were taken about a week earlier at a different lake. And then here we see we're using, again, rule of thirds. And here we had a bench on the other third and the bottom part of the photograph. Now, something like this may be nice to consider if you're doing a portrait. Say you're doing like an engagement portrait, have a couple here, you could put them on the bench. And this is the type of image that might sell well as a wall portrait. Of course, in addition, you're doing a close-up, but it's always neat to get some really nice effects showing the environment, because that's the type of thing that if people want to put up a large wall decor image of them, it's not so much in your face. It's a nice scenic, but yet they're in it. So it's kind of special. And here we have a combination of leading lines taking our eye from the right to the boat area. And I put the horizon line, tree line, in the lower third of the photograph. In this image here, I put the rowboats in the bottom part of the photograph, and then the rest is leading lines of direction, mixed in with the skyline is towards the upper third of the photograph. And this just shows more depth. So remember, to get more depth and show more dimension in your photograph, use lines of direction, and you can also add something to the foreground as well. And in this next photograph here, this is similar to the horizontal one that I took, but I took this one vertical just to show more of the sky. However, after looking at this, I realized that this has some potential for being a really nice print that you could maybe hang in your home or office, or possibly might do well in print competition. So in the past, I did quite a bit of entering in print competition. That's how I got my degrees and all. And then I was also asked to judge other professional photography competition. So in the next segment, I'm going to talk about some of those rules and some of the things that I did to turn a regular print into more of a dynamic print, possibly making it a print that's going to do well in competition. So in the next segment, I'm going to talk about how we change this print to this being our final print. So I think you're going to find this quite interesting and helpful in your photography. So don't miss it.